Vomiting Rainbows, episode number 55. It's a darker news podcast where I tell my co-host, Black Dahlia, owner of two eyes and one nose, stories that he knows nothing about, in which he chews them up and spits them in a beautiful rainbow. So welcome.
It's what I do.
I'm glad to have you back. You know that this is the first time that we've done a podcast in almost a year. Not quite. We're like 2 months shy, but literally we did the last one in this room, which you can't see because I put the virtual background on. But,
I know.
But it was in July of 2019. So there hasn't been a vomiting rainbow since then, which is just sad.
You were pretty injured at that point, weren't you? Yeah, you had some kind of leg issue going on.
I broke my foot. And then I guess I decided that we would take a break from the podcast for a bit. You went on tour. I missed one of your shows, which I was distraught about, and in the Bay Area. And then now we're confined to our home.
Well, you saw one over New Year's, which was nice.
I did get to see one over New Year's. So yeah, so first off, one thing, it's great to have you back. It's great to see you virtually. I had mentioned to friends that I hadn't been doing the podcast for a while, and that I just didn't have like a co-host that wasn't on tour or wasn't now on the radio or all these things.
Mm-hmm.
And the number one thing that everyone said is that they wanted to have you back on. Like everyone that I talked about, and they said you were definitely the most controversial guest. So I think that's great. And I think you would want nothing less.
As long as they don't get a visual on me, I want them to have the visual on you, Doug, and then they can just listen to me talk. You know what I mean? That'll be perfect. We'll get all the action we need with that duo.
Oh, right.
Your picture, my voice, we're going all the way.
Excellent.
I can't wait to hear what kind of crazy shit you got for me this time. Is it like sick and twisted people meeting Uber drivers and abandoned parks? Is it fucking what is it? You never know what it's going to be with you, Doug. It could be insanity.
It's been a pretty tough period of time for us. We've all been in quarantine, and so I figured I'd start this off slow. But here, let's first of all go back and remember what was going on when we left the podcast. So when we left the podcast, since then, right when we left, Notre Dame had burned down. To give you an idea, does that feel like ancient history?
God, yeah, I hadn't even thought about that one for a long time.
Yeah,
and I have to admit, when that first happened, my first thought was terrorists. It's got to be
absolutely
terrorists. Turned out it wasn't.
It turned out it was contractors. Contractors.
That's right. It was contractors. They're a form of terrorists.
Exactly.
Anybody who had contractors in your house knows.
Yeah,
it is a form of terrorism.
So then, just after that, the next month was the El Paso shooting, which was we totally have forgotten about. And Hurricane Dorian hit the Bahamas. I mean, that was a big soccer game called Cup of World or something. Yep. Millions of people threatened to run into Area 51. I don't know if you remember that.
No, why were they threatening that? That's where they keep the aliens, right?
Right.
The out in New Mexico.
Yeah, so a group of guys had determined that what they wanted to do was bum rush Area 51 with the mindset of they can't kill us all. So so like 1 million people signed up, millions of people signed up for this Facebook group, which they were going to do a fun run into Area 51. And the guy started as a joke, and then it grew. And so he ended up having like a little festival in that little town right by Area 51.
Roswell?
Yeah. But he refused he said, we're absolutely not going to run into Area 51, because he got contacted by like law enforcement agencies that were saying, I understand what you're saying, but this would be a terrible idea. And he was like, it's a joke. I have no idea.
And that's really, if we've learned anything from the pandemic, it's that the most insane fucking shit that people can say is all just treated with deference now. It's all just somebody's opinion, right? So
yeah.
so it's like anything can happen at any time. The president didn't do everything wrong. He did everything right, actually. Everything has become 1984. It's just fucking, there are no facts anymore,
No.
So, let's go running into Area 51.
Sure.
Why not?
Why not?
Yeah.
And so the other thing that you may have forgotten about is Australia caught on fire.
I went there and I did benefits. That's why I was there in Australia. I did a benefit for the bushfires.
Oh, wow.
Just a couple months ago, that looked like the end of the world.
Absolutely.
I've been to Australia half a dozen times. It's such a great place. The people there, it reminds me of the America that I grew up in, with actual nice people in it. And it's like, it's such a great place to go. And you see these heartbreaking things of these huge, vast areas of Australia just disappearing, and people actually taking off from their jobs with no fire training and just jumping in and saying, I want to help, and I thought, wow, this is amazing. And I got offered, hey, will you come out and do a show and raise some money for the fire things? And I thought, sure, what the hell, and then as soon as I get out there, everybody starts talking COVID, and suddenly nobody remembers the fires anymore. And I'm like, hey, wait a minute, what's going on? It was crazy.
It's insane. Like it's just to think that was 4 months ago, and it's not even on. It was all the news. Also, all the news was that Bernie Sanders was going to beat Joe Biden.
Yeah, that's right. Wasn't that a wonderful pipe dream? And
that was
talk about irony, right? It's like, what happens, okay? Right when we actually need healthcare for everybody, right when that's the obvious smart move, and when we see that it not only benefits, poor people, it also benefits all the rich people, right? It's having everybody have some healthcare is actually a good idea for everybody, so everybody doesn't get sick. When that finally is brought out in stark relief, that's the day Bernie has to leave the contest, and we just have to put up with, either the Republican approach, which is, let them eat cake, maybe they'll get lucky and get insurance if they're rich enough, and then the Democratic approach, which is like, oh, we'll cover a few people, I don't know, we can do a few things, I don't know, we're scared.
Right.
You know what I mean? It's like finally it just becomes so obvious which the right move was. And so, of course, he's out of the contest, Yeah, you got to love that.
Yeah, I think the other thing that I think is hilarious is to think during that same 3-month window, Bloomberg spent almost $1 billion, and everyone's like, huh? Who?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was a great one where he tried to come in and buy the election, and at least we proved you can't do that. But that almost makes things sadder, because it almost means that Trump sort of won fair and square.
Right.
It's like, never mind about Russia's help or leaning on the Ukraine or any of the other stuff, but just the idea that, like, oh, you can't just walk in and buy it like fucking Bloomberg. Yeah, it's incredible.
Yeah. So then that leaves us to where we are now, where we live blocks away from each other, and yet we cannot do this podcast in person. And that's Corona time now. So that's kind of where the world has gone since our last podcast, which is exciting. So now we'll just jump straight into Canada and Nova Scotia. And I don't know if you've been to Nova Scotia. Have you?
I have never been to Nova Scotia, but they refer they refer to the people from up there. It's sort of in Canada, they kind of treat them like they're hicks, you know, they call them newfies.
Oh,
And they
really?
sort of make, yeah, they sort of make fun of the people that live up in that area, Halifax, Nova Scotia, Newfoundland. They sort of put them down. Those are their hicks out there, I guess, you know. But apparently there was this crazy shooting fest yesterday, right? Somebody
Yeah.
opened fire.
See, you're still in my thunder. That was definitely one of the stories.
But I didn't read anything about it. I don't know
Well,
anything
there you
about
go. I will tell you all about it. So,
right.
first of all, Nova Scotia has the Bay of Fundy, which I've actually been to, and it's where the tides are. It's the highest and lowest tide in the world. So when you go out there, it drops 40 feet. So you can see tankers sitting in the water, and then when the tide goes out, they'll just be sitting on dirt. It's
Wow. So
unbelievable.
do people drown there a lot? People
They
going
do.
out thinking they got some room, and then it's 40 feet deep. Holy shit.
Well, as you described the natives, you can imagine that they get in four-wheel drive trucks
Right.
and they hit the mud thinking it'll be really cool until their truck sinks in the mud, and then they try and get out. And when they try and get out, they sink into the mud, and then the water starts coming back in. And they literally have to rescue people on the regular for that. I watched it happen when I was there when I was young.
Wow.
Yeah. So the other thing that I love about Nova Scotia is it has this place called Oak Island, and I would love to do a full episode on Oak Island at some point. Oak Island is where supposedly Blackbeard put all of his treasure, and it has all these like tunnels and passages under it, and there are actively people now searching for that treasure on Oak Island. And they actually, of course, you can't do anything in this day and age without having a reality show. So it's called The Curse of Oak Island. If you want to look it up, it's amazing.
Wow.
Yeah.
I think Blackbeard was the only black thing they've ever had in Canada. I've been there a bunch of times, but the only black thing I've ever seen, Blackbeard.
There you go. So now out of that,
right?
what
Drake
you mentioned
doesn't count.
What?
Drake doesn't count.
Drake doesn't count at all.
Yeah.
I mean, we've seen that dance. We all know. So you mentioned this already, but there was the worst mass shooting in Canada just happened, and it was 23 people died. And it was this guy named Gabriel Wortman. He was a 51-year-old denturist. So he had a disturbing business where on the outside it just had huge teeth, and it's Wortman's Denturists, and you would go get your dentures there. He apparently got into some sort of domestic dispute, and then he decided to go on a shooting spree.
Now, see right there. I mean, look, if you're angry at the person you're with, especially during this time, just murder them. Don't kill all the rest of us. You know what I mean? I mean, come on. Let's have some sense of proportion here. I understand you're angry, you're sick of this person. You were sick of them before the illness. Now
it was probably going to happen anyway.
Right. Yeah. Now you just can't stand them. I mean, I get it. Kill them. Absolutely. But please leave the rest of us alone. We haven't done anything to you.
Right. So before all of this, their largest mass shooting was 14 people. And it was an anti-feminist who went into a women's engineering department and killed all the female students. What an asshole.
Because women have it so easy. They've been dominating engineering for so long. It was finally time for a turnaround.
Yeah. And just when they're about to burgeon onto a great career, why not take them out? That's really dumb.
You remember a guy similar to that? You say anti-feminist. This guy, I guess, was one of those things they call an incel. The guy from Santa Barbara.
Right.
And it was
Exactly.
very strange because he seemed kind of like a good looking little trust fund kid. He didn't seem so desperate, but apparently he was just horribly angry at women for not being attracted to him,
Right.
you know. And yeah, apparently that's a real thing now, people going out and killing women because women in general aren't attracted to them. And what's so crazy here is that it's possible that you could be killing a woman who's turned on by very aggressive men like that. So you might even be getting rid of the person that you're looking for. That's the horrible paradox here.
Yeah. Well, I think even more so is just the fact that it is absurd to not just go on to something like Headspace. Just take a minute, go on Headspace, talk to a therapist, maybe tell
Right.
them about your feelings. Maybe you could get past it without pulling out a gun and just massacring people. I don't,
Or just go on Tinder and find you some pussy. I mean, isn't
yeah,
that what everyone does now? I think I'm the last person who hasn't gone on it. Can I admit that on your show that I have
I
not actually been up on Tinder?
I actually find that shocking.
Yeah, I know. Well, I think it had to do with my ego. You know, I didn't want to be up there sort of parading like, gee, you know, I need some pussy. But apparently, this is what everyone does now, like to the point where if you actually talk to a woman, you know, she pulls out the mace and calls the police. You know what I mean? Like you have to meet everyone online or you're not really meeting in the legitimate way now, apparently. It's
Yeah,
very strange.
it's before it was hidden. Now it's like kind of the norm.
It's the only way, yeah.
It's the only way.
Women don't trust you unless they've got your virtual self to back up. So
Correct. So back to our story. Before all of this happened, um,
right.
just before this happened, the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, the RCMP, they had just tweeted in their Nova Scotia account saying, "We're going to get to relax and go to sleep tomorrow." And then they had a picture of the cat, you know, with its two paws out, like sleeping.
Uh
So that
wow.
you couldn't get a more ironic tweet. It's unfortunate, but there's a town called Portapique, Nova Scotia, and around 11:30 p.m. they got a firearms complaint. It only has like 150 people in the town, so the RCMP headed out there to check out what was going on. And by the time they arrived, they saw that there were multiple properties on fire, and they had a report of a man who was wearing an RCMP uniform and walking around the town carrying a rifle. And
Wow.
that's all they knew. So
Maybe it was Dudley Do Right. Is
it
that
could have been.
possible?
So
Maybe he's just trying to save Farnell. He's trying it's Dudley Do Right. Come
it
to
could be.
save Farnell.
It could have been. So anyway, he decides that the police, one of the first police officers says there's a major issue here. We need to get more troops or more mounted police in there. The police arrived to the area. There were now 3 structure fires, and they found 2 families murdered, and they were no association to Wortman as far as they could tell. They also didn't know that it was Wortman at the time. All they knew is that it was the guy running around in the RCMP uniform. And the other thing is they said that he also appeared to be driving an RCMP cruiser. So all things pointed to to him being actually a police officer.
But he was not.
He is not a police officer. He's the denturist.
Wow. And does he actually have warts? Have we established that?
Well, I looked at a picture of him. He does not have warts, and there are no actual warts visibly. I'm sure he has a wart or two,
Right.
but his whole family is just full of warts. So they just all had warts. So maybe that's what he was upset about.
Right, could be.
So the next call to the RCMP was from a nearby town about 25 to 27 miles away. And they had a report of explosions, gunfire. And when they arrived, there were 2 more houses on fire and 3 people had been killed. One police officer had been pulled from her cruiser and executed right by the car. So this was very aggressive and also now appeared to be very indiscriminate. Like there wasn't really a pattern or that they know of yet. They're also being very tight-lipped about this. You're not seeing or hearing a lot about it, which I thought was really interesting. They're hoping to do the full investigation first before talking, which is very not American.
Yeah, we like to talk first and think later.
We would have a 24-hour we would have a 1-week news cycle just on on speculation of who this person was.
This one kind of reminds me, do you remember a couple of years ago in Norway when there was the guy, he was very against immigration. And so what he did was he waited for the Liberal Party to have this sort of young people's liberal conclave that they did on this island. And he went out there knowing they'd be unguarded. And I think he managed to kill like 50 young people all at once. Well, this kind of sounds like somebody who has, I wouldn't be surprised if some kind of political agenda emerged, but I guess we don't know that yet.
Yeah, and he also, there was like a group of young diplomats that had gone into Norway before that, and in the town, in like one of the major towns there, and was having a meeting before that, and he put a bomb there and blew that up. So while everybody was rushing to that bomb, then he went to the island and killed all the other. He was like trying to get rid of the youth of that movement, like all in one shot. It was very planned and very disturbing. So our guy Wortman, he was next spotted on a hill at this place called Hidden Hilltop Campground, near a place called Glen Home around 9 a.m. So this is like, we're talking an hour, and he's already killed several people. And they found many cars on fire along the road. And his car was discarded somewhere along that path. So at some point during this time, he switched into a silver SUV. And they had just put out an alert for his RCMP car. So he probably was watching all of the news. So decided that would cause too much, or he'd be an easy target. And then he started burning houses along the road. So there are like 15 scenes where he stopped, killed people in their cars on the way to work, burned their cars up, and then also somehow decided to stop at random houses and burn the houses down. It's absurd.
Yeah, I think this is the part that is so always so disturbing to those of us who are not homicidal maniacs, and I will put myself in that category.
Yeah,
and that's just that, I almost envy them, right? Because it's one thing if you're angry at somebody and you want them dead, and we've all had that feeling. But imagine just being so consumed with general hatred that, any old person will do. You just don't give a shit. It's like, whatever, everybody's the enemy. I'm just gonna take out everybody. You know what I mean? Like that feeling, it's almost enviable, because it gives you an answer. You know what I mean? It gives you something to work toward that's attainable. It's like, okay, I can't create anything, but I can certainly destroy something now. And I'm going to destroy someone and whoever, I mean, you can almost see why people have this feeling, because modern life gives us this. Like, we don't know where to go. We don't know what to do. We don't know what we're attached to. But we, some of us know we can just destroy something. you
Yeah, but
know?
I feel like that's the lowest of the low of human. That's the lowest person in the world. So that's like, I can't do anything, but I can undo everything. So,
Right.
which is just like the saddest form of despair that you have to be in to do that. And our guy continued on his rampage of sadness, and um he stopped apparently at a truck stop, and that's where they finally got him. While I guess he was filling his car up, and he was shot there. He didn't die there. They got him into custody and they tried to save his life, but unfortunately he died at the hospital. um, I think a lot of people would really rather him live to know what this was all about, because it's clear that some of the people had to be targets, because you don't you don't have a police car, and you don't have a police uniform and a bunch of weapons at the ready for no reason whatsoever. It just, that doesn't make sense. It was
Yeah.
14 hours that they hunted for him, and there were 15 to 16 locations where the crimes occurred, and they honestly don't have it all pieced together. They said it's like a jigsaw um, puzzle of confusion, because they were kind of, they thought they had him cordoned in that first small town, and then they found out that he was in the other town, and then he went up to like the campground, and they really don't know what they're like, piecing it together, and they don't want to say what his relationship was to the victims. So all they're saying is some of the victims are known, known associates of him, or he had a relationship, and some of them aren't. That's as far as they're willing to go. um
Well, now at least we can say that it's not just Americans that are batshit crazy. We've now got a Canadian.
yeah,
We got one.
yeah.
So they can no longer claim moral superiority over us,
Oh,
right?
I think they still can.
They still can't.
Yeah,
Okay, fair
yeah,
enough.
yeah. I
They've
mean,
got that. They've got that prime
have you
minister.
seen their leader speak, and then look at our leader speak, and then just tell me, look at his cabinet of advisors, and look at our cabinet of advisors.
And what's funny is he started out as like, he's so dumb. He kind of reminds me of like Joey from Friends, but he makes, he makes Trump look smart. I mean, he makes Trump look dumb. You know what I mean? Because you just, the bar is so low now. When
Oh,
that guy first got elected, I was like, oh my God, what a fucking empty suit. Now it's like, oh, our genius next door, Trudeau,
yes.
it's really, it's opened things up, in terms of other people. I think Boris Johnson now looks like a even keeled, intelligent leader. You know what I mean? I mean, it's so
I don't
funny.
know if I'd go that far, but yeah, he's definitely Trump. He's definitely Trump light. So, I feel like, so I feel like there's just this, um, it's just unbearably sad that we immediately think, okay, well, at least now, because they've had some sort of mass killing, that somehow we have something on them, because we're
That's
just
right.
known for horrific events.
That's right.
That's tragic, when that's like the one thing that's like America's like, yeah,
Right.
yeah, you can't point fingers at us anymore. That's tragic. But the other thing that was really weird about this guy, so many things were weird. He was known in the town as being a wonderful, generous person. He was spotlighted on the news multiple times for helping people in the community out who had cancer or lost their teeth, and he made dentures for them.
Wow.
Yeah, he was considered an upstanding person in the community.
So now I wonder about that. Like, does that mean that the person had a very dramatic break with reality, or does it mean that, what seems more likely to me is like just the whole thing was a farce, right? The whole thing was a setup. The whole thing of being kind to people or whatever. The whole time he's planning and he's thinking about it. He's thinking about how wonderful it would be just for everybody to be dead, for him to feel that blood. Like I
I
wonder. about that moment? You know, when was the moment that you go from kind of being a nice guy
well,
to that?
I feel like there's an element here of not getting the career that he wanted and trying to show that he was worthy, because one of the key things is that they showed in his high school yearbook at the bottom, it says hopes to be like an RCMP officer in the future. So
Oh,
that was in his high school yearbook. and
wow.
and throughout time he collected and of old RCMP cars and restored them. And then
Huh.
that uniform that he had was an official uniform that he bought at some sort of auction. So, I mean, that's really weird.
Yeah.
I think that's just a section of this that we're going to find out about later, that
Yeah, there's
somehow
got to be some good sexual stuff on this.
there's going to be.
You know what I mean? He's got the uniform and the role playing. You know, there's got to be some sexual tie in here.
It's something weird. I don't know if he was married either. They said that there were he had a lot of disputes with his girlfriend, but that was a neighbor who said that that was quite a while ago and hadn't talked to him in years or a year. So not unclear would be the
Did he
best.
kill the girlfriend?
That's unclear. So
Oh,
they haven't named all the victims yet. So
wow.
once they do, then we'll have a little better picture of who, why, what, and what he was doing. Um, but not to be outdone by Canada, we we have the always amazing, never unentertaining, often terrifying Florida man.
Florida. I, why did I know that Florida was going to be part of this?
Of course.
It's become like a cliche now. That fucking Florida.
It
I've
hasn't
spent a lot
become
of
one.
time there on the road, and I have to say, I love Florida. I always have a nice time there. I think people are very nice there. They love music, and I don't know what is it about. There's something about it. Like, it's so south, you don't even consider it south anymore. You know what I mean?
No.
Like, the South is like Georgia and South Carolina, but Florida, it's like it's a whole nother territory now.
Right.
It's a whole different ball game.
And it's insane that you can put in almost any day of any year and type Florida man and you'll get a story. Like there's a story, and it's always the most bizarre story that you've ever heard. There was a trend last year where everybody was putting you could put your birthday in and it would give you all the Florida man stories on your birthday. It's absurd. But this guy named Robert Kovner, he was very upset with people not wearing masks, especially in the supermarket. So he
I have to
decided.
thank my good friend DJ Mars for making me a mask. He made me a mask. He came over and brought it. It's got like KISS logos on
Awesome.
it. I give him
Where
crazy
is it?
props for that.
You got to
I
show us.
I will take a quick break next time, and I'll
Send me a
run.
photo. I'll put it
Yeah.
on the Instagram.
Yeah. No, I'll get it during the show, man.
Oh, excellent.
Just to prove.
Okay. So he posted, he was on a Facebook group called Sebring, Florida, which is where he is from, and he made multiple threats on this Facebook group, threatening the local public store for I guess a mass shooting because nobody was wearing masks in the public store. So
That's so great. It's like it reminds me of one of the first stories I remember from when I was a little kid. You know, I remember I was with a group of little kids. We'd just gotten out of the carpool. One of the kids started running and it was icy. And his mother called out, you know, stop, you'll slip. And so I was trying to help and I ran after him and tackled him, you know, just to make sure that he didn't
right.
that he didn't fall and slip.
Yeah.
You know?
I'm going to take you down so you don't fall.
Right. I mean, You gotta love it, man. When the cure
Yeah.
rivals the sickness. I love it.
Yeah. Well, that's a Trump statement for this. So,
Right.
but yeah. So apparently, his most alarming post is, I find it criminal that when you enter a supermarket or pharmacy without a mask, I find you either stupid or selfishly endangering, or you don't give a fuck about endangering others. Will it take
Just so I'm gonna shoot you.
yeah. Will will it take a shooting of a few of you selfish assholes in the parking lot to get this message through? If I get diagnosed, uh, I guess with COVID, I will head to the Publix and empty every clip I own. So
Wow. And do you
yeah,
think that he would like it would be one kind of thing if he actually spared the people with masks on
right.
and just shot the people who didn't have them?
I
That would be kind of a
I think that's what he was saying he was going to do. But
wow.
yeah,
Well, at least he'd be following through if he actually showed the consistency. But I think after a certain point when you're shooting, like I was saying before, everybody just becomes equal. You know, you're
again,
shooting, everybody goes.
we're not sponsored by Headspace, but if you haven't used Headspace and you're thinking of doing a mass shooting, please go there first. Um,
Or
uh,
Tinder. Just go on Tinder.
or Tinder. And then because of this, so
No,
he
wait a
had
minute. Hang on a minute. Hang on a minute, Dave. People want to know. You're a celebrity around town here. I want to know if you're up on the dating sites. If you're up on Tinder and Bumble and these sites,
see this
can women
podcast.
get to you this way?
This is not about me. This is about our criminal who is out there. And
Okay, I'll
by
take
the
that as a yes. I
by the
will take
way,
it as a yes. Ladies, get up there on
by
Tinder.
by the way,
Find
quick thing. He had posted several times that his family and his friends and family members had died, that 7 of them had died, and his mother-in-law was fighting for her life at home from the horrible virus. So basically,
Wow.
yeah, so basically what he was saying is, it's these dumbasses that are spreading it, and why my family has lost 7 people.
Wow. So it was actually motivated by some kind of logic. It's
Yeah.
just a very twisted kind of logic. A bunch of people in his family had died from it. Wow.
Yes. And so
Okay.
because of that, now he's going to be charged with 2 felonies. The felony is written threat to kill or bodily injury or conduct, including a mass shooting or act of terrorism. And then use of a two-way communication device to commit a felony or to facilitate a felony. So that's punishable by 15 years in prison. Um, he does not look like the guy who would have actually gone through this, but I would have said the same thing about the guy who was the denturist. So, and the sheriff doesn't take any of this lightly, any of these threats lightly, because in last year in 2019, there was a shooting in a SunTrust bank, a mass shooting leaving 5 dead. So they've experienced a lot of tragedy in this neighborhood.
Wow.
Yeah.
See, well, this is what fascinates me is that, you know, the whole random and mass idea of it, you know, where we've it's like a society that's given up.
Right.
You know, it isn't even just like, look, you know, I'm angry, something happened in my life that pissed me off, I'm getting my revenge, which makes some kind of logic. It's always this more convoluted thing now where it's like I had to take out a bunch of people and I have some justification, but not really. You
Right.
know?
So yeah, this guy, when he got out of the police car, he just looked defeated. I mean, yeah, I feel like the look on his face looked like if you got one of the evil fucking trolls on Twitter and you catch them in real life, and then they want to crawl into a hole in front of you. That's what he looked like.
Right.
I think he was trolling on the Sebring local site to scare people, and then realized that how he went way too far.
Now, are they giving him 15 years? Really? Was he?
I mean,
That's
this
incredible.
just happened, so we
The
won't
worst
know.
one I've heard about in a while. I don't know if you heard about this, Doug, but there was a guy who got locked up in Mississippi for a small, like, some small amount of marijuana. And he had his phone with him. They
Uh-huh.
hadn't searched him and taken his phone. So he has his phone with him. In the lockup, he tells them and offers his phone up and says, "Hey, I still have my phone on me." These Mississippi clowns apparently like had passed some kind of really draconian rule about having cell phones in jails. So even
Right.
though this guy admitted it, and even though it was their fault for not frisking him for it when he first went in, they found him guilty and gave him a 15-year sentence
Oh
for
my God.
possession of the phone. Possession of the phone. He's locked up in maximum security in Mississippi. This is a black guy, and can't get out for a minimum of 12
Oh
years.
my
And
God.
it was because he had a phone on him.
And because he admitted it.
Right.
He could have probably gone to his hearing the next day and
Right.
thrown it in a trash can, and his life would.
That's
That's
exactly right.
that's absurd.
Yeah.
So speaking of absurd and mass killers, because we like to finish everything off on a very high note, Kim Jong Un, North Korea's leader and Donald Trump's true love,
Yeah.
has undergone heart surgery because of his excessive smoking and never-ending work routine. Apparently, that's according to
Ah.
state media. Apparently, intelligence agencies feel like the surgery didn't go as expected because he missed a major holiday and a parade. While they don't think he died, they think he's in critical condition. And this is a huge issue because right now he hasn't named a successor. And there's the family dynasty. And I think it's his sister who is the one that he was grooming to take over for him in like in a situation like this, but he never named them. So it's rife for a infighting civil war. But if that something like that happens and it destabilizes North Korea, then South Korea and China and all the neighboring um, uh, countries will have a mass influx of North Korean refugees, because once that order destabilizes, then everybody's going to want to run for the border.
Okay, so this is where I often disagree with my liberal and progressive friends,
Sure,
and
I-
I
I'll
consider
I'll I'll be one of those.
I consider myself to be a liberal and a progressive, right, when it comes to economic issues and stuff like this. But I believe I'm very bellicose in the defense of liberty, right?
Right,
When you allow certain countries to proliferate, it leads to mass murder. It
right,
leads to horrible things happening. So an example would be like, what happened in Rwanda 20 years ago when almost 1 million people were put to death over about a 3-month period, right?
right.
A lot of my friends will argue with me, we're not the world's policemen. We should leave people alone, I just think, wow, so I guess you guys would have just given up on World War II and not even bothered fighting it, because we're not the world's policemen. So how can we do that? It's like you look at something like North Korea, and basically what you've got is, the world's largest penal colony. You've got a madman in charge, and he's literally got a couple million people locked up in camps for things that their grandparents said 30
Right.
and 40 years ago, right? I mean, it's like when you allow these kinds of things to proliferate and there's no world body that stops it and says, yeah, okay, enough is enough. right? And then you add to it, the insanity of a guy like Trump trying to get some kind of political advantage out of his thing with Kim Jong Il,
Right.
Kim Jong Un, which is like, what is the political advantage? I don't really understand. But anyway, he was jockeying for it. I mean, it's like this is an example of like, this country should not exist in the form that it's in, and this madman shouldn't even be in a position to be running it. You know what I mean? But at this point, it's democracy on the run, and so we all have to run away and pretend that there's some kind of logic. Now watch the bloodbath happen from North Korea, and watch another Stalinist state rise up with a different dear leader. All because places like America and Europe have just given up and said, okay, we're not the world's policeman anymore. There's nothing we can do.
Well, it's not even that. Now, I mean, I agree with you a lot. Many of your points of this is something that nobody wants to touch. It's a hot potato, but it's also a hot potato of if whoever goes in has to accept the financial issues that come along with helping that country out. So you can liberate them, but you can't liberate them and leave. Like we learned that in Afghanistan. You just can't go and liberate and then just hope a power vacuum appears. Bless you.
Sorry.
And so you just don't want that when that vacuum leaves. I think that's what there's like all these
Fortunately, there's
headlines.
another country that's been related to them for
I
thousands
know.
of years, genetically and every other way, and that's South Korea. So
Well,
there is a solution here, just
no,
same way that Germany came back together after communism. There's no reason why there can't be a reasonably managed North Korean state, or that why it can't just meld with South Korea and make Korea.
or China. China's been its big father forever, and whenever they like a small impetuous child, whenever they like do their saber rattling type stuff that they do, then China always backs them up. So why not go in and resolve all the problems now? I mean, South Korea would never want to have China on its border, but I mean, it's absurd that they're in the spot that they are and allowing the things to occur. It's absurd that we're allowing the things to occur there, but it's just such a dynamite area for ripe for just destabilizing the entire. It's like a powder keg.
Yeah, well, that's again why I say, I mean, I don't pretend to have all the answers here, nor do I think that we can, take on everybody in war. But again, there was something illogical about the idea of 1.7 billion Chinese people living under the thumb of their government,
Right.
and we lied to ourselves, and we told ourselves, oh, as soon as they get enough capitalism, it's all just going to magically turn into democracy over there. I mean,
Right.
I think what we're seeing now in the world writ large, whether you're talking about the Chinese sphere of influence, the Russian sphere of influence, South America and the way that's going, democracy is now on the run,
Yeah.
and we are no longer strong enough to defend it or push it forward. And so, there was a lot of there were a lot of people who I think were reasonably upset about our attempts to, sort of enforce democracy in the Middle East, and the incompetent way that we did that during the Bush era. But, it's like, there is an argument to be made, I think, for enforcing democracy, even at the point of a gun.
Right.
Well, people think I'm crazy, but it's like, it worked in Japan after World War II. We enforced democracy at the point of a gun. It worked in Korea after the Korean War. We enforced democracy in South Korea at the point of a gun. And what happens? There are only two relatively well-governed and reasonable quasi-democracies in all of Asia. And those are those two, the two that we forced, Japan and South Korea. If you look over at China, you've got 1.7 billion people under the thumb of a totalitarian regime.
Right.
So I mean, none of this stuff is going to be cured without democracy. And people need to start getting used to the fact that on a certain level, it's going to have to be delivered at the point of a gun. You know, look what
Well,
happened in Syria. You know,
yeah,
the head of Syria, Assad, has now killed 500,000 of his people indiscriminately just for being in rebellion against him. But oops, what can we do? Nothing.
right.
We're not the world's policemen. You know, again and again, we see these enormous massacres, and that's what South Korea is set up to be, because we didn't insist that they be a democracy. They must be
Well,
forced to be one.
well, so our great and fearless leader who stands up to any sort of injustice at all said that he has a very good relationship with him, and he can only say that he wishes him well.
Right.
So,
Exactly.
so
It's
that's
incredible.
yeah.
Black is white.
So anyway, I mean that's our podcast for this Vomiting Rainbows episode number 55. We're going to keep doing the podcast. I hope you'll come back to the next one.
Of course.
Thanks for listening. We welcome any compliments or comments or ideas.
Right.
Contact us at contact@vomitingrainbows.com, or you can find us on all social media at We Vomit Rainbows. We're on iTunes, Stitcher, blah, 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 all of those. And the big thing that they can do, anyone who's listening to the podcast, is rate us and help us grow by sending it to your friends.
I will do the virtual background next time, so I get the crazy hair effect that Doug's getting.
Yeah.
I want that myself.
Yeah.
And don't forget to visit me at thedwarves.com. Buy all my shit, make me rich.
Absolutely. Are you doing any more fundraisers? Didn't you do a fundraiser just recently?
Did a little virtual show for the Parkside, trying to make a little money for the Parkside staff over there. It was a lot of fun, just sitting in the bedroom, slamming out Dwarves tunes and talking shit. So we got to do it soon. I love talking to you, Doug. I miss it.